Hello. So today I wanted to talk about faith. Generally speaking, I wouldn't consider myself a person of faith. Not only like in a religious sense, I am not, religious. I don't really believe in anything, but also I think in general terms about life. For example, I struggle to kind of like believe in people. Usually meaning that I don't think I'm expecting the worst, and that is not necessarily a healthy thing. And I'm trying to kind of like do better. I've been trying to do better for years, and I think I've made a lot of progress. But I just had a moment this morning. I was finishing reading Paradise Lost. I was reading it, and because it is a book that I really like, but it's also like about a story that I grew up with, but which doesn't really speak much to me right now. I'm pretty detached, and I can still appreciate the story. Like, that's the thing. And because I'm not really a believer, I have a different take on like a lot of things, because there's also commentary, and I'm reading that part, the commentary, where people kind of like explaining little things here and there. And it is interesting because basically, I think that the view that they have, for example, there was this one passage that they were like talking about freedom, specifically, it was like the fallen angels talking about how like they were kind of like free from that they were not free, their thoughts weren't free, and because they were kind of like they were being kind of like guided by heaven. And it's interesting because for me, it's kind of like what like the commentator kind of like disproved. It was like it doesn't really mean that like that the heaven, that God is like authoritarian, but to me it kind of does. I think that you should believe that there is a plan, that there is something going on, that there is like a long-term plan. Like, you don't really feel these things, but for me, who I'm not really a believer, as I said, it does feel very authoritarian. And that's pretty much why like this book was so, I know it's a poem, but like it was so significant for me when I was a teenager, when I first read it when I was 15, because it put into words lots of things that I was feeling, about not just about religion, because I had my issues with religion, but like most people are going to accept that like you don't have to be part of a religion to be kind of like saved or whatever. But it is kind of like the way that God's portrayed. Like, that is something I had like a lot of issues with. And yeah, so it was kind of like an interesting journey for me. It felt like a lot of the things that I was feeling and I couldn't put into words. I was reading the novel, and then it's not a novel, it's a poem, but I was reading it, and then I was getting I don't know, it was putting names into things. And as I said, like it was very revolutionary for me, even though I think that the take I have is not probably what Milton would have wanted me to have, but it still is as I said, a novel that I really enjoy. And like when I'm reading from a different perspective, because when I was 15, I was still involved with religion. I had my issues with God, the way that he's portrayed in general, like through the Bible, through whatever. But I'm back. So here's my version of Paradise Lost. And honestly, like, this is the only book that I have ever annotated, but like there's a lot of like that here, and I don't know, it's just self-fitting. And I have lots of different annotations from different times that I've read it, and I don't know, it's fun. It really does help when I'm going through things to have like a color coordinated, and just I mean, a lot of like the writing is just the underlining with a pencil, so like those are not as visible. But yeah, anyways, so but I was kind of like thinking about, like, because sometimes when you're talking to people, you can feel compelled, because people have different experiences, and all of them are very subjective. Like, they believe because of experiences that they had, but like that is not proof. And I think that that's kind of like what I would need for me to kind of like stop thinking the way that I do. But like, that is not happening. Like, I respect everybody and like their faith and what they do, but there's no part of me that is ever tempted to believe in anything, and that's the whole thing for me. And but as I said, like, I'm pretty chill, so like I'm not out there unless people kind of like they come after me, and because I have said some unkind things here and there, not unkind, but like, for example, I used to like talk about deities and people and like these higher powers as kind of like imaginary friends, but I never really just said this unprompted. It was usually when people were trying to push something down my throat. Maybe they were trying to make me behave differently or do something differently based solely on what they believe in. So yeah, so I have said like, I'm not going to change my ways because your imaginary friend has like said that. And as I said, like that is kind of unkind, so I don't really talk about like that anymore. I try to be a little bit more not only understanding but like more careful with my words. But as I said, sometimes people they put you on the spot, and if that's the case, I don't think there's any issues. But like completely, but I'm very surrounded by religion as things are happening right now. Like I'm going to a cell group once a week. I am participating because like the church my parents go to, which used to be my church, like they have this charitable work that they do. They go to prisons, they deliver gifts and all that, and I'm kind of involved in it. Not because like I'm not coming from the same place that they are, but it's still kind of like it's still helping people, and ultimately that's kind of the case. And regardless of what I believe in, I think that a lot of my principles, a lot of my values, a lot of my morals, they come from like the way that I was brought up. So there are like religious influences. Naturally, as I said, like I don't really do things right now coming from like that I'm not coming from the same place, and just I'm not helping because like that is what God would want us to do. That I'm helping because I think that that's what we should do. It's kind of like the thing about living in community. It's interesting because I think that like for everything that I do to get to this point where I am at today, where I'm like I have to, I want to help people. I'm doing what I can to help people. I kind of like it was a long journey for me to get to this point, because there was a lot of like individualism in the way that I behaved. For example, when I was 18, I was very much just I was locked in on my goals for myself and what I was going to do in the future, and I wasn't really caring about anyone else, around me. So I think that like a decade later, I can confidently say that I'm no longer that person. That I am out there, I am interacting with people, and that I am. And honestly, it's kind of interesting that like a lot of these things they started to develop properly once I left the church. I left it. It was in December 2019, so it's officially it's been 6 years. Like that's a lot. But because I think that sometimes like when you're surrounded by a religious environment, like when you are a religious person, you do things out of habit sometimes because that's pretty much what you're supposed to do, or because that's what people around you are doing. That's kind of like the path that you're taking. But so yeah, so like when I left, I kind of like was like, okay, but I'm gonna keep doing this right now, and then I had to find the meaning of like, yeah, I think it's important for us to help each other. That is kind of like, I know it's a very basic thing, but it was interesting because like by living in this environment, I was finally able to do things more genuinely, because I struggled. I would do things to help people, but a lot of times I would struggle because I felt miserable doing it. I felt like I was kind of like wasting my time, I was wasting my life, and like right now I don't feel that way anymore. I think as you like get older as well, I think that experience gives a new perspective to things, and some things are just honestly they're not that deep. There's kind of like the golden rule, right? It's pretty basic. It's like do to others what you want to do to yourself, and I think that is something that I believe in. I guess that is something that I have with me. Interesting because like why exactly do you believe in that? And without a higher power, like I don't really have like a different explanation. Like I'm pretty much just like I think that that's what's right. But of course you have to consider like why is that I think that this is right, and we go back to the things that I was brought up in, and also because some of the things that I think that I do, they are kind of like I think everything is a direct consequence of the way I was brought up. It's just that some things I do them because it makes sense. I used to do them, and some of them I do the very opposite because like the way that people did things when I grew up, like I didn't agree with it. I was kind of not stuck, but like I because it's also like comes with you being an adult and you starting to kind of like fly away a little bit from like the place, from like your surroundings, and there's nothing wrong with like changing your mind basically, because I used to feel very be very adamant in the fact that I couldn't change my mind, that some things they were kind of like immutable for me, and at a certain point I was like, what, like there's nothing wrong with that. But it took many years actually for me to get to this point of like, yeah, like I learned more, I see more things, like I have witnessed more of humanity, of life, and as a consequence I have changed some of the some of the things that I think they have changed. And there's merit, and honestly there's merit in change. Basically, it's not only okay, but it's also good for you to just reflect on things and realize like, yeah, this is not how we're going to do things, this is not the right way, this is not the way for me to do things. And also, like as I said, I think that part of me is always seeking like a deeper explanation of things, a deeper something to what I think. And right now, like after many years, I think I finally am at a point where I can kind of where I can I can just accept these at a surface level. Sometimes, I mean, when I say it like this, it sounds bad, but like not everything needs to be that deep. You know, like not everything needs like a complex. There's no need for a complex backstory or like every single thing that you do, and that's fine. As I said, like it took me a little while for me to get here, but I'm finally here, and because there's some things they don't have to. Because you can, something that you enjoy doesn't have to be connected to like a bigger thing. It can be something that's superficial, and it doesn't really detract from the value that thing has. But yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap this up. We're gonna leave at any moment now, and it's really hot, so I kind of like I need to go get a fan and or something. So, anyways, bye.